a leader in exile, lives on a razor's edge. And now she is caught between enemies they have made and new ones they have yet to discover. And the unnamed order have found themselves deep in hostile territory, under the watchful eyes of local rulers, for reasons unknown to her, who despised her very presence. And while her underforced strength and lacking of provisions, every decision would be a gamble, and the world of the night would be a web, and the new threads would be spun by powers ancient and terrible. And one such power was Al-Asharad, the mysterious head of the Banu Hakim's sorcerer caste, an ancient child of the even more mysterious Shulugi. Al-Ashrad was a master of blood magic, known for his creations and a slow, careful demeanor that betrayed a mind planning for centuries ahead. And as we see ourselves, Ab is giving a brief to the unnamed. And that is the most curious part, my sire. For centuries he has kept to himself, a recluse in Alamut. But my sources confirm that recently Al-Ashrad has become uncommonly active, greatly pushing the agenda of the Council of Scrolls. He is making political moves. And of course the unnamed will be standing at her map, tracing over the seat of power of the Ashrad here. He is an ancient master of blood and a formidable piece, but he is far. And to influence him now would be a waste of resources. A storm on the distant horizons, and I have fires to put out in my own camp. And we will not waste our efforts on him. And she would whisper to Ab, an interesting development. Keep watching him, but from a great distance. He is not our concern. Not yet. And her focus remained on the immediate needs for survival, gold, provisions, and followers. They had many options, like hiring ghouls to increase safety or mercenary guards. But the cost would be far too steep on our coffers, and she needed to rely on her own strength and cunning. And as we proceed through the wolves' stings, eventually we will find some events on the dry lands. And as the unnamed would test her mettle against and try to find some gain, would eventually initiate a hunt. And they would seem themselves across a frantic scene and watch as a small family of local farmers would be cornered by a pack of starving wolves. And Osteron, of course, she was raring to go. Wolves! Good! This will be a proper fight. But before the full plan could even implement, the unnamed would engage in a swift and brutal fight. They would protect the innocents here, and in the aftermath, one of her followers would eventually find herself a sword half buried in the dusk, a fine made Syriac sword, and the unnamed would take it without comment. But the hunt would lead to another far stranger discovery, and drawn by an impossible sight, would lead to a fertile lush lands in an arid landscape. And she would track it to a secluded grove and a small patch in paradise that the locals would call the womb of the earth. The unnamed would find herself seeing a small, well-tended garden, and in that a man, ancient, but his movements fluid. But at the ripe old age, he appeared to be young. And his name was Vishtab, a fellow Canaanite, though entirely different from any that she had previously encountered. And he would look up from his plants and smile. Ah, a visitor. Welcome. You were drawn by my work? I imagine my gardening knowledge is vast, as you can see. Some might even say incomparably vast. The unnamed studies him. Utterly fascinated, he radiates no ambition and behaves as both a creature of the earth, not of the jihad, in a state of being that she could not comprehend. He is one of the blood, yet he does not hunger for power, and he hungers for life. He is a predator who chooses to be a shepherd of green things. You tend to that which requires the sun, an unusual pastime for our kind. The sun is a destructive fire, yes, but it is also the engine of all life. And to be eternally denied its touch is our curse. But to forget its power is a fool's error. And in tending this garden and nurturing life from the dust, I feel I am remembering the sun. I am engaging in a dialogue with creation itself. And that is a power greater than any prince could hope for. And his words would strike a deep, strange chord with the unnamed. She was a creature that was bound to the infernal, the darkest powers imaginable, and had always felt a strange fascination with fire, and would flirt with the very forces that could unmake her. But with Vishtab, she saw a different path, a new, subtle form of power. And in her own thoughts, a revelation would light itself. He thinks he is remembering the sun, but what if he is speaking with the light bringer, the first fire? To control life, to command it to grow from nothing, that is not a rejection of darkness, but the ultimate expression of control. And to hold the power of creation in one hand and the power of destruction in the other. To be a gardener and the blight. To bring forth a beautiful, perfect world. Only so you have the pleasure of watching it burn. Yes. This is a power I must understand. And she would spend many days with the gardener. And she would learn from him. She would become a gardener herself. And would acquire a new lens to view the world. For she would not be embracing life, but be learning its mechanics itself. And this new, strange perspective would weigh on her mind, and she would turn back to the familiar work of survival. And a contract would offer a chance for much needed gold. My sire, our men are not at full strength, but we do have this contract. A risk is worth taking, sire. There is gold and glory to be won, said Nostaron. And as the unnamed would analyze the enemy's forces, noting that they had 5 fellow Canaanites among their race, she will weigh the odds. I will try my luck. It is a chance to earn our keep. And if we win, we are enriched. And if we lose, it'll just be another lesson itself. The unnamed would give the order to join in on the war, and she would move to engage, but they would be too slow. And the tide of battle would shift before they could even make any impact. The opportunity would be lost, and it would be a failure not born of cowardice or poor strategy, but just a lack of hustle. The opportunity is gone. Let us find another. I've heard of another quest. Prepare the company, we will move at once. Lost battles were merely that, just testaments of time. And as a creature of pure forward momentum, she could only move forward. For her eyes and mind were already focused on her next move. And the lessons of the vampire gardener would remain deep. And it would be a seed planted in the darkness of her soul. For the unnamed, survival had become a constant, brutal exercise and adaptation. and the philosophies of her head prior and the martial zeal of her child were useful, but they were abstract. And on the road to power was measured in more tangible currencies. The number of bodies that one could command, and the fear, the dread that one could instill in the hearts of their enemies. And it would be from these grim necessities that the Unnamed would begin to leverage the hunt and discover its use in her adventuring acts. The hunt itself was a necessary act for her own survival, but now it could also be repurposed as not just a means of sustenance, but also for acquisition. She would find the most promising among the flock of mortals, and through the binding intimacy of her bite, she would claim them for her cause, and they would be enamored by her kiss. And it would be a simple way to grow her cult, one subjugated soul at a time. And on moonlit nights, in all various towns in the Middle East, the air would be thick with all the bodies, the roasting meats and cheap wine, and deep in forgotten alleyways the Unnamed would watch like a ghost as she would sort through the crowd, testing the emotional currents and looking through the common rabble to find the best piece for her worth. There's so much noise, and the thoughts of mortals are a cacophony of jumbled fears and fleeting desires, and most are useless and their spirits are sour. A merchant with his mind slick with greed and a guardsman full of hollow pride. The common rabble are fit only for a quick meal, but now I can search for instruments. And I need souls with a bigger spark that can be sharpened into fine tools. Her, there, yes. She does not cower, she does not beg, she fights. Her blood sings with indignations, not fear. It is flagellamic, but with a core of fire and a calming influence on the beast, perhaps. But with a will that will not easily break, she will be a useful addition to the herd. The Unnamed's hunts were not chases, but a terrifying convergence. She would flow through the shadows, and when she would find her targets, and as he watched the woman storm away from the vendor and go down a deserted street, the Unnamed would already be there, and her presence would drop the very temperature in the area. And the woman would stop, and the angry words dying in her throat as she beheld the quiet figure before her. It would be a brief silence, as the fear would begin to melt in the vampire's placid gaze. But the movement would be too fast for the mortal eye to truly process, and the Unnamed would bear no struggle, as her embrace would be absolute. And she would savor the spirit of her victims, but she would not kill them. And as she would pull back from her bite, the woman would not flee, but stand there dazed, with vacant eyes, and now would be but an echo of the creature she was, and would be recruited. And it was through these methods, through a natural discovery as an adventuring band, that she could at least strengthen her cause with the regular mortals, and hopefully increase the bodies used for her work as a mercenary captain, for she had no other way of effectively gaining more personnel, since our coffers were already draining. But on the road, as they traveled eastward, there will be many opportunities, and there will be a lone skilled warrior, some that were starving, and some that were unnamed. And one would be approach and offer his services. His blood might be potent, his purse might be full, but his brooch is worth more than his life or his gold, and it will bring more swords to my side and strengthen my own regiments. And she would let the man live but refuse to let him join, and she would collect many of these brooches that would increase her own prowess, ensuring her survival in the upcoming battles in the future. And across many of these journeys, she would come across soldiers and merchants, tomb raiders, and encounter various skirmishes. She would even approach one potential woman along the road that had a fire in her unseen. The unnamed would just herd many to ensure her blood would remain sustained, and in moments where she would be forced to use her power, she would be able to quickly replenish. But the relative peace along the road would not last very long. The darkness the unnamed carried with her was a magnet for violence, and on one such night, as the distant fires cast long, the violence she had courted would come directly to her door, and her camp would eventually descend into chaos. The perimeter would be breached by an onslaught of attackers, their armors flashing in the firelight. There would be cries of alarm mixed with brutal clashes of steel. And though the defenders were caught by surprise, they were rallied to fight, and the attack would be vicious and well coordinated. The unnamed would emerge from her tent, and she would bear a mask of eerie calm. They wish to remove us from this land. They have cornered a beast in its lair, expecting a stray dog, and they will learn the difference. Nastaran may fight with honor, and Ab, he would cancel a hasty hit and run, but I will simply end this. And the unnamed would not shout orders amongst this attack, and she would not direct her troops. Instead, it would be a stillness that would erupt as she walks through the thickest parts of the fighting, and she would rampage and enter the fray. But this would not be like the uncontrolled frenzy of a beast. It was far more terrifying. And it will be a conscious decision to unleash hell upon their enemies. It will be a messy and brutal affair. And it would efficiently clean the board. And the brutality would not be a loss of control, but a necessary tool for the conflict itself. And the unnamed would be like a blur, and her followers could barely even see as she would whirlwind all through the enemies like a plague, and her strikes would shatter and break and destroy the enemy. She would rip through mail and leather with her hands, and her whispers would carry on the wind. It would be a level of brutality that was higher than any of her followers had witnessed before. There would be an unforgettable display of what their shy leader was truly capable of when she would forego all pretense of subtlety. And the attack would end as quickly as it began, and the few remaining assailants would flee, and their minds would be shattered from the sheer horror that they had witnessed. And the camp would remain silent, save for the groans and the crackling of the fires. The unnamed would stand in the center untouched, and her breathing perfect that her shy demeanor would be oddly out of place amidst the gore. And her mind would already move on from the battle. She would be hunting again soon, her rage gone, replaced by her purpose. We are leaving here, Ab. There is a treasure hunt to the east. Prepare the company. The night's work is done, and a new hunt begins. And in the wake of violence, there would always be echoes. The unnamed's brutal rampage had secured the camp, but such an overt display of power would be a thread that once pulled that could unravel anything. And a new follower would of course soon be welcomed into the fold, unaware of the bloody precedent his new mistress had set. But the world does not forget such horrors so easily, and these secrets would have a way of finding a voice. And Ab would enter the Unnamed's tent amidst their travel as they were doing a brief stop near the Alamut. My sire, there's been a complication. One of the attackers from the raid that survived the night is a woman named Yaka. She fled to a nearby village and speaks of a demon who walks among them in a silent storm of death that tore her comrades apart. She knows too much. A witness. Not to a feeding but a rampage, and she saw the truth of me. And a bribery will not silence the memory, and ignoring her gives time for the tale to grow. And this risk is unacceptable. And absolute silence is too valuable to pass up. Kill her, Ab. It was a simple command, and it would be delivered with the authority of a queen ordering dinner. And for a mortal, there was no mercy, and the death would be swift. It would be a quiet mission in the dark, and a new loose end would be tied off. When Ab would eventually bring another manor to his sire's attention, he would explain that their agents had captured a supposed thief, who would be in fact carrying an ancient and valuable Zoroastrian scroll. My sire, the Silasa, the Banu Hakim's keepers of history, have requested the scroll. They offer compensation for our efforts. However, the heretical lost tribe would also pay dearly for such an artifact, or we could keep it for ourselves. The Unnamed would consider the thoughts of the buyers. There would be no loyalty, just opportunity. The lost tribes is chaotic and unreliable. And keeping the scroll invites their scrutiny with no immediate benefit. And the Silasa are offering a known quantity of gold. And that is more useful to me right now than this dusty scroll. It doesn't even contain any knowledge on the Bali. Ab, give the scroll to the Silasa and take the gold. And these transactions would be how she would deal with all great powers. It was like a time when she learned the Inquisition would make a move against her with a campaign of espionage, and turned her contacts into traitors she would choose not to hide, but strike back. And when she discovered that the Council of Scrolls was using a new powered orb to spy on communication, she would reject their system outright and create her own. The Unnamed would leverage what the factions could offer, but she would never be indebted to them. She would wield her own power. We would now shift ourselves over to the ongoing war contract that she has accepted. And we would see ourselves with Nosteron. Their forces are considerable, my sire. They have nearly double our men. Their Cainite forces are strong. A direct assault might be unwise here. We are not here for a glorious victory, we are here for payment. We will harass their flanks and support the main host. My sire, says Ab, there is something you should know about this enemy force that we are facing. The commander is your nephew. And she would look at the banner, and then a brief memory would flash between her mind of the scholar Eben crumpling on the floor and her nephew's smug face as her dream would be murdered right before her eyes, and her expression would not change, but her outward voice would remain casual. Is that so? It does not matter. I'm simply doing this for the contract. But beneath that would be a sort of satisfaction, and it would be as if a long overdue debt. Ah, yes, him. Fate has delivered him to my sword, and he feared I would grow too strong. So now I will break his armies, and I will be paid for the privilege. And the gold is an excuse. but the revenge is a prize. My lady, the enemy's commanders is separated. A large contingent is moving west. A tactical error. This is our chance. We will strike them now while they are divided. She would give the command with absolute certainty, for she was not just a mercenary fighting for coin, but she would be an instrument of her own vengeance, and would use all manner of war to settle debts of blood, and this small hunt would commence.